So hello to all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Soccer Hub Talks. It's a great pleasure to be here again with all of you. And today we have a special interview and conversation between Allan Pardew and Vitor Gouveia. I will present them in a few minutes. But before we start, I would like to interact a bit with our audience, just know a little bit more about yourselves. So I would ask for you please to introduce on the chat box some information about your location and also what kind of job do you have. So please use the chat to do it, okay? In the meanwhile, just to let you know that you will be able to ask some questions both to Vitor and Allan, okay? You just have to introduce the questions on the chat box. So don't hesitate to do it. I will be glad to introduce the questions to Vitor or to Allan. And also to let you know that soon we will have available a course with Vitor Gouveia about how to build a soccer game model. So the course is already in pre-launch, so you can visit our website and see more information about it. So now I will introduce Vitor Gouveia and Allan Pardew to this conversation. Okay, we have now Vitor. Vitor, hello Vitor, how are you?
Hi Ricardo, good morning, I'm fine, thanks. And you?
Good morning. Perfect. Allan, you are in now with us. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. I will leave you now with Vitor. Before that, I would like just to present both Allan. Allan is an experienced coach, former coach of West Ham United, Newcastle United, and West Brom, with a long career. Vitor Gouveia already has 10 years of experience as a soccer coach. He's a UEFA Pro coach, and recently he launched a book only available in Portuguese at the moment called To Train to Play. So Vitor, the voice is yours. So I will leave you guys talking a bit and see you in a bit, okay?
Okay, Ricardo.
Bye-bye.
Introduction and for this invitation. Hi, Allan. For me, it's a huge pleasure to talk with you. This is not an interview, but a nice talk between two coaches. It's a pleasure for me. Good morning, Allan.
Morning to you.
Allan, can you hear me well?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Yes, and it's fine. It's perfect. First of all, I want to apologize for my English. It's a little bit rusty, but I believe that we can have a nice conversation and that you will understand me well. Sometimes I will talk a little bit slowly because it's important to have a good communication. Okay?
That's fine. Your English is much better than my.
Okay, I believe so. Allan, you started your manager career as a caretaker in Reading in 1998. Is this correct information? And your last experience was last season with the West Brom squad. In these more than 20 years of experience, how did you change as a coach? It's a question. And how did you see the evolution of the manager or coach since then till now?
Well, of course, 20 years has passed since I was at Reading, and I went in as a junior coach.
Okay.
That time was 2 divisions below this Premier League. So the players were very, very committed, very focused on their careers and where their career path. Quite a young team. We achieved some good things. The last few years in the Premier League, the players have got much bigger. Their social media, their careers are almost independently running in parallel with a football club. So it's very important that you understand that that they all have different responsibilities and different kind of ideas, and you have to kind of manage that situation. It's particularly difficult when you're leaving out international players who in their own country are regarded as big celebrities and big personalities, and you know, you have to justify that with your tactics and your coaching methods. So I think it's a more tolerant time in this era. and you have to understand that your game plan has to work and live with the players that you're representing.
Okay, and recently I was in the Portuguese National Football Coach Association, and I heard Mourinho talking about a player of him that in a match 30 kilometers from Manchester, the player wanted to leave the stadium in a top car. How do you deal with this, or how must a coach deal with these kind of situations, taking in your ideas that you are explaining about the difference between competitive levels? How do a coach manage a situation like this?
I think it's important that we call them lieutenants, your top players in the team, who kind of managing for you. So, you put the principles in place and they kind of see it through for you. So you come to an agreement maybe with 4 or 5 senior players on what the arrangements should be for everything regarding travel into the games, and particularly after the game. Now, I always had a single rule that everybody left on the bus, and we would stop not far from the stadium, and the players could exit and get in personalised vehicles to take them home to see their families or to gain some valuable time for them. So that's what I did. I think, Jose, I think that was pretty much what happened in that scenario that you're talking about in the end. But for whatever reason, that wasn't, must have been agreed, and the player wanted to try and have an individual case. When a top player comes to you with an individual reason, it has to be a very, very good one. The birth of a child, a family member having some serious medical conditions. So I think in those situations, yeah, you do make exceptions.
Yeah, but sometimes I feel that the top coach, CEO of a big enterprise that deals with millions, but at the same time, it feels that in some occasions is the weaker link of the chain. You know, because it's almost underneath the shadow of these kind of star players. And regarding leadership, in your opinion, what are the greatest challenges to a top level coach nowadays?
I think the biggest problem, and social media has played a part in this, is top players lacking the personality to transfer information to other players. You see so much now of players with headphones in the dressing room, and it's becoming almost like you have your own regime as an individual in the dressing room, and that might include your own exercises, pre-exercises, which is fine, but with your headphones on. And actually, the camaraderie of the group might only just be when they return from the warm-up for like 4 or 5 minutes. That I don't necessarily think that's long enough. So, some managers, don't want headphones. Some think it's very important. I had a couple of very religious players who felt it was very, very important to listen to their messages in religion before. And, you have to kind of understand all of that. But the real problem I'm trying to get at is that in the past, a lot of players would have some serious leadership qualities, as vocally and within their body actions that everybody could feed off. And there's less and less of that. It's almost like you, as a coach, you're kind of really wanting it to happen. You want a senior player to stand up and demand from others, and that's where I think when I speak to other managers of my ilk, that's where, and actually all through the levels, we're all struggling for that kind of player. And I think this attachment to your phone and your, Netflix and everything else that the young people are really sort of engaged with at the moment is causing us a problem of leadership in the dressing room.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it's a crisis of values, clash between different generations, but there are challenges that a coach must be able to face in these times. You talked about your first experience in Reading, because I asked you, and you coach Premier League teams like Newcastle, West Brom more recently. What, in your opinion, what is the main difference between a top team like the ones you trained in the last years and the team, for example, that you started training 20 years ago? What are the differences between a top level team and a lower level team? Focus, the quality, the technical quality. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think the leadership side of it and the desire to win has always remained the same. You know, I actually played myself at non-league before I was a professional, and it was no different. And sometimes the work rate of those players can be higher than perhaps even the best professional. But when you get to the top level, there's a real focus on their job, and that might be whatever they're bringing to the group, whether it's technical ability or they're bringing speed or they're bringing endurance. They might be bringing everything. You know, a top player like Hazard, for example, at Chelsea, you know, his endurance to sprint at the end of games is as good as at the start of games, plus all the technical quality you get. And that is the level you're talking about. So when you get to that level, you understand the players that you've managed before at a lower level don't quite have all those attributes. So, of course, they make more mistakes. And as a group, you make more mistakes. The margins are smaller when you get higher up the level. And therefore, when you are playing at a certain level, let's say 2 levels below the Premier League, the other team is making as many mistakes as you are. There's a lot of transfer of possession. There's not the control that you can have. So it's a combination of a lot of factors, but the big issue I've seen, not in desire of win or anything else, is just the combination of putting it all together and delivering it on the day. The consistency of that was greater at the higher level, of course.
Allan, this is an interactive talk. I have here an interesting question of Joshua Kalenga. He's asking you, what is the most rewarding thing about your job, about being a coach? What do you enjoy the most on that?
Yeah, I think if any coaches who are listening to this, and this is a sort of coach's platform, I think the most rewarding thing is to see improvement under your leadership of a player, whether it's a trait in their personality or it's a technical skill that you've improved. I think most of the players that I've improved over the years possibly would be more as a person rather than technically. And you have to remember that you have to put all those things in place. Don't let some behaviour get into certain individuals. Try and address their behaviour if they're alienating other team members or your staff, as well as the technical stuff. And when you see a player grow into something else, like I look at Adam Lallana, I had him when he was I had him at Southampton, and I could see he grew quickly. And now I see him at Liverpool. Unfortunately, he's injured and not playing too much these last year or so. But as a person, I can see he grew and become this lovely, rounded individual, plus all the technical ability. And I think they're the sort of things that I find pleasuring.
And that kind of evolution, not only in technical and tactical issues, but also about the personality and the growth of the group, the formation of the group. And regarding, do you only seek for good players, or the human values, the human part is also important to you?
I didn't understand that question, Vitor. Can you say that again?
Okay, I will repeat. When you build up a squad, a team, you only seek for good players, or you also like good players with good and strong values and a strong personality that can match with your own values as a coach?
Yeah, that's a good question, because obviously you're more ingrained to have a connection with players who are of your ilk. And what I mean by that is, you have your kind of work values and your same sort of drives to win and or whatever. But there are some players that are complete opposite to you. But you have to understand their mentality and try to grasp where. I mean, Wilf Zaha at Crystal Palace is a player who has enormous technical ability. And there were times when I found it difficult to understand his focus on the game, what he was trying to deliver. Was it for the team? Was it for himself? And, just discussing with him and understanding his frustrations, i.e. players not giving him the ball enough. When he was in opportunities, when he made runs, he wasn't getting the distribution. And his understanding of the capacity of the squad, what we could do and what we couldn't do, was important. It was one of the main reasons I signed Yohan Cabaye to Crystal Palace, was to get more out of Wilf Zaha. I knew Cabaye could find him and bring him more into the game. So it's those kind of connections you have to understand where they're coming from and try and draw them in by giving them something that makes them bond with you.
Okay, absolutely.
I hope that answered that question. It's a difficult question.
Yeah, it's not easy. That's why I'm asking you.
Absolutely.
Allan, changing a little bit the theme, the Premier League started in 1992. The changes since then are tremendous in several areas. Regarding the game itself, I believe that it changed a lot in the style of play, in the speed of the game. Besides the normal evolution of a sport, in parallel with the improvement of all the surrounding conditions, what are the factors that contributed the most to this evolution of the game?
Okay, well, firstly, sports science took a big hold in the Premier League, and our ability to get players to perform at a higher level on a consistent basis has grown through that, i.e. Making sure that their well-being and their recovery was correct. That was one side. Tactically, the game has changed. Of course, the Premier League being the Premier League in the world is going to attract the best coaches. So our influence from Arsene Wenger through to obviously great Portuguese managers like Jose, etc., and now German managers like Klopp, Spanish managers like Pep Guardiola. We've had a world feed of tactics. So I think Premier League is at the cutting edge of tactical play. And in the last 3 or 4 years, there has been a significant change in one position that has really affected the game, which is the goalkeeper and the distribution of the goalkeeper. So when I was a successful manager in 2000 or whatever, you could put a high press on a quality team and you could win the ball back. You had a great chance to win possession back in the last third and obviously have a great maximum chance of scoring. Now the goalie is beginning to defeat that press. So a lot of the lower teams in the Premier League can't afford to do a high press because the goalie will chip it to the wide player. He will hit it on the back of your back four, particularly the Liverpool goalie who can do, and Man City goalie. They're probably the two best distributors. Not only have you got the two best teams, but the goalkeeper stops you from trying to damage them. And it's their level of control, their level of their mental level of tactically how being aware of what the team can achieve by beating that press. Because if you don't high press a top team, then you're almost going to concede more possession than you might not have if you could afford to do a top press. So that's an interesting thing, and I think all coaches now are looking at their goalie to say, well, we need a goalie that can distribute and be as calm in possession as they are, and be a kind of almost like a libero. You call it that in Portuguese, from the goalkeeper.
A few years ago, we call it libero, almost.
Yeah.
almost the same. Yeah, that's very interesting. Not just the influence of foreign coaches and also players, because in 1992 there were 205 players in the first journey of the championship, and recently about 80 players. Of course, that do you think that this affects the development of English players? Because nowadays the English players doesn't have so much space in the Premier League like they had 20 years ago. Do you think this is negative for the British players?
In some ways, yes, because even at the lower end teams, you might be carrying 15, 16 international players, and these young players, not only in my time, because I played in the top division, which would have been Division 1, I didn't need to get past international players. They were in the top league in England. Now you have two young players at Chelsea, for example. Hudson unfortunately got injured yesterday, and Loftus-Cheek. These two young players have to get past the players of the ilk of Pedro and William to get in the team. I mean, wow! These guys have got to be really top-end players. So the learning system in England is something that we're all very, very concerned about, because if these players don't get match experience against men and understand that people's livelihoods are at stake in the first team, because in the reserves and in the second team, I'm afraid it's not that important. But if you're starting to affect a senior player's livelihood, you've got to deliver. And it's only when that finger is pointed at you by a senior player and a coach do you really understand what the game is about at the highest level. So, yes, the opportunities are less for the English player, but the experience and this is the other side of the coin, the positivity of playing with 20 international players on the training ground every day is only making our players better. And we actually, right now, probably have the best young players in the world, I think, in terms of under 16, under 17, under 18 national side. For the first time, and this is not by no coincidence, I think it may be it's the influence of you quite rightly stating about how many top international players we have in our squads that are raising the level of our young players. It is more difficult to get in, but when they get in, Foland, for example, at Manchester City, wow, this guy can only learn. So how much could he learn off David Silva every day? You know, I mean, wow, it's what a learning experience, and to have the top coach in the world as well.
Yeah, because the competition is crucial to develop players, because it models the players. But as you were saying, being able or having the opportunity to coach every day with fantastic players, very absolutely. Allan, coming a little bit back, talking about the goalkeepers and their influence in the style of play of a team. In what way do you think the goalkeepers affects this style of play of the team? Because nowadays we see Manchester City sometimes building up with the goalkeeper more 2 players or 3 players, and a few years ago this was almost unthinkable. In what way do you think a goalkeeper is crucial to the way a team attacks, not only the distribution, but you see Ederson in Manchester City, not only him, but he's a good example. He can not just play with short passes, but he also has the capacity to give rupture passes. In what way a good goalkeeper can affect the style of play of a team, not only distribution?
Well, you know, I hear coaches say, well, you know, ultimately they have to save the ball. You know, that's the most important job, and make crucial saves at crucial times. And,
it's important to forget that.
That is important. And De Gea probably is the best at that part of the game. But, you know, I would favour the other 2 goalies you just mentioned there, Ederson and Alisson, because their range is so brilliant tactically. I remember when we played Manchester City, they had a tactic that if a team attempted a high press, the goalie would smash it as hard as he could on the back of your back four, and the two wide players would run off the line inside of the fullbacks and score, relatively an easy goal from the goalkeeper's kick. It was quite clever how they did it. They almost invited you to come and say, come on then, and then bang. As a coach, it just widens your armory to sort of go, okay, from the goalkeeper situation, we could literally score with one pass, let alone, building a beautiful tack and coming through the team. And that is the beauty of both Man City and Liverpool, I think, over some of the top European sides that I've seen. They have the ability from the goalkeeper to score an instant goal, as well as making a 48 pass move to score, with a tap-in finish at the end. So that's how crucial they can be. But I think this is a great development for the game. We've talked over the years about how negative coaches have made the game with a defensive block and drilling their teams that make it very, very difficult. Park the bus, with obviously the Jose's famous quote, etc., of how coaches can strangle the game. But the goalkeeper now is making that more difficult, and that can only be good. And the fact that we're playing out and trying to encouraging players to take risks in the final third, in your own final third, really is, as you say, gone to another level. I mean, in my day, if I did that, my coach literally would try to strangle me.
But it's interesting because it turns the game much more unpredictable for the team, for the defensive team. Because if you lower the block, you are facing players that can be able to manage small spaces with huge mastery. If you pressure high, you must control the space in the back of your defensive line. So I believe it's also constant to think in which is the best way to stop this and to prevent some.
Very, very difficult against those two teams in particular because of the goalkeepers, for sure.
I believe so. And so, Allan, how do you see the evolution of the games? What are the trends of evolution of the game in the next 10, 20 years? What is your thinkings about this?
Well, I think one thing that will change at football clubs, I think the head coach, the manager, whatever, whatever you want to call the guy who is organising the team tactically, is going to need help from his technical director, because, as you say, the players' power is such that you need two sources of power to keep them in line. And I think Jose mentioned that at Man United, that he didn't feel he had enough support network around him. And I think coaches are going to come thick and fast. I think mood managers will become a thing, like a coach will stay. And then, you looked at Real Madrid, and I'm going back 20 years. They change their manager every year. And I think a lot of Premier sides, you might see more managerial changes, but technical directors staying in place and making sure that the philosophy of the club continues and the manager comes and works within the philosophy of the football club. And I think that's going to be a big change, particularly in England, because I think on the continent that has happened for a long time, but in England, not so. And I also think that there will come a tipping point of social media. I think at some point managers are going to need more from the players, and I think that the saturation of the telephone will end. I think I see some celebrities already talking about leaving their phone at home and trying to understand more about life. And I think it will. I don't think we're going to be so ingrained in front of a laptop going forward. And I think that social element of the dressing room will come back to us again. I really believe that. And we might need to, I don't know, ban the phone from certain areas or not need to. one way or the other, that will evolve. I genuinely believe that.
Okay, very well. Allan, regarding the development of the game model or the one idea of a way to play, João Nuno Fonseca is asking us what are the most important defensive and or offensive behaviors that you start developing in the preseason. What is most important for you when, for example, when you are working the defensive moment of your team?
Yeah, I think pre-season is very much a time to nail down with your side the disciplines of defending. Because normally in pre-season, you're coming up against, I like to take lesser teams, whatever level I'm at. I will take a lesser standard of team to play against, particularly to nail down defensively, to make sure that against these lesser sides, we don't give them any opportunity. We understand, the attacking players in particular, understand that we need to have a solid base for them to deliver. And then as the pre-season gets nearer to the end, I start focusing more on the offensive side. We now have the solid base. We now know our defensive duties. Now, how are we going to break down a low block? How are we going to find a route? How is our goalkeeper going to find a way past a high press? And try to be a little bit more kind of loosen up the group a little bit. But I genuinely think if any coach is listening to this, start that first 2 weeks, I would steer away from the imagination of the group. Someone like Cabaye, I would totally ignore some of the technical brilliance if he produced it in that first 2 weeks, and just focus on his position where he should be defensively. And then as we grew the pre-season, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, let that type of player start using their imagination.
Yeah, it's important to have a consistent basis when you start working with a team, and almost is a trend to put all. It's important to have a hierarchy, priorities to start working with them.
One point I would add to that, Vitor, is that you also need to. The pre-season is very, very important to bond with your lieutenant players, your players who are going to be your leaders, on the field, to really get the message to them of what you are trying to deliver. Because if they're with you, then wow, the job is so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely, because you have sergeants that are your right.
Yeah.
Allan, and about the system or formation, it's an important component of the game model. In what way is it important to you? I know that you used several formations, 4-4-2 in Newcastle, 4-3-1. In what way is the formation important to you?
Yeah, I think the formation of, I think the problem we have so much analytical information these days that you can become a little bit defensively kind of obsessed with the opposition. You kind of go, right, this is what they do, right? Let's really focus on stopping them. And then in doing so, you take so much away from yourself. So you have to remember what's your assets of your team, what's the setup of your team, what is its strengths. And I look at Burnley, for example, who changed their season round this season in the Premier League by making keeping 4-4-2, keeping their two big strikers on a very direct side, but their two wide players very much almost central midfield players and a very, very tight four. They did that so well last night at Charlton. Their midfield four was very, very compact, not much room to get in between the lines and let the superior opposition, or so-called superior opposition, have the wide areas. So whatever your base of your team is, whatever it is, the setup is important, but it's also the balance of dealing with the opposition, not getting too much bogged down by that, but be able to play your own game. And you know, a lot of the game in the Premier League, particularly in the area that I've worked, the bottom 10 clubs, that area where you don't have the finance to go and be a top team, to kind of know on transition, and when you have possession, what's the best way you're going to score? How do we score? And I always used to ask my teams that. Okay, we're playing Man City. How are we going to score? I mean, you know, we all know we have to defend very, very well and all of that. But how are we actually going to score? Because at some point they will score. Let's accept that. Let's accept that they are going to score 2 goals. So how are we going to get 2 goals? Oh, gaffer, you know, a set play, blah, 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 and transition. We need, yeah, that's it. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, being football an opposition game, it's important to have some information about the opponent. But I also agree with you in this point, because is when you subjugate your team, your idea only to the kind of opponent you have, you will pass fear to your players. You will not pass trust in your own work, right. And that's interesting also.
Basically, putting fear into a team is very, very easy, and I've done it myself. And after the game, kicked myself, thinking I put too much fear in the team today. You know, I inhibited them, so we didn't have no imagination, no shots on target. You know, and then you must look at yourself as coach and be honest and say, I got that set up. You know, we got the feeling wrong there somewhere.
Yeah, but Allan, that kind of critic spirit about our own job, it's important to keep us connected to the reality, because when we think we are doing things well, we will fall at any moment.
Absolutely,
I believe in that. Allan, what? Being the game model transmits a kind of identity to a team. What are the most prominent characteristics of a team managed by you, by Allan Pardew?
I like to think that my teams over the years have always had energy, a commitment to try and win from whatever scenario, and mainly, my teams have always had an amount of flair in the team. I always set my team up with a certain amount of flair. Now, sometimes that's backfired on me, because there can be times when those flair players don't deliver offensively and they don't deliver defensively, and you can get a big defeat. And I've had some big defeats in my time. But I also believe, if you've got a lesser team, if you don't have enough flair in the side, you don't offer any threat. And so if someone said to me, what do your teams represent? I would say a threat to the opposition. We will be a threat to the opposition on our day. We might not win. It might not be our day. We might not deliver on both those levels, but we can. And I think managers who've played against my teams probably recognise that my teams are dangerous. They're beatable, but they're dangerous.
Okay, very nice answer. Allan, just almost ending, what was the job that most pleasured you? What was that job that you have to choose one season, one team? What was the best season that you felt you had as a coach so far?
Yeah, I mean, I did have a standout season at Newcastle when we finished 5th. Obviously, it ended up as coach of the year in the Premier League and stuff like that. That was an amazing season when you just had the right balance in the group. And when a player come out, another delivered. We had a strong mix of offensive and defensive players. So that would be the year I picked. But also my first year at Crystal Palace, when they was in a relegation zone, to lift them to mid-table, and a different kind of look. So those 2 years were my favourite years.
And Allan, what are your professional plans for the near future? When we will see you again in the bench?
Yeah, well, I'm ready to go, and you know, like all coaches, there's this thing about, you know, your friends and your colleagues in the game. They say, "Oh, where are you going? Where are you going to end up?" Of course, as a coach, you can't answer that. You don't determine where you end up. Somebody else does. So hopefully, I'll get an offer that I have to commit to.
I hope to see you soon. Allan, thanks a lot for this conversation, for your sympathy. And it was a real pleasure for me. I hope all the best. I desire all the best for your future, and maybe again in a Premier League.
Vitor, I wish you all the best. It's been very lovely speaking to you.
Okay, my friend.
Top man. Thank you.
Okay, guys, we're out of time. Thank you very much, Allan. Thank you very much, Vitor. A wonderful job, Vitor. Thank you very much for being with us. Allan, once again, thank you, and see you soon to both. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.